Comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed. Hi, welcome to Writers in Focus. I'm your host, James Taylor, and today I'm once again delighted to have as my guest Cassandra King. Cassandra, let me welcome you to the Atlanta Fulton Public Library and the Fulton County Government Center. May I call you Cassandra? I forgot to ask you. Listen, we go back at least 6 years.
At least. Yeah.
Cassandra King is a noted novelist, having written Making Waves in Zion, The Sunday Wife, The Same Sweet Girls, and I interviewed you 6 years ago on Queen of the Broken Hearts. You are a native of Atlanta. You've been married twice. I don't want to get too personal, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
Your latest novel is Moonrise. I finished it. It's a wonderful book, and from a man's point of view, I'm going to look at my notes right now. I'm going to say that it is a Southern, Gothic, romance, quasi-supernatural tale of some well-to-do folk who spend a summer in Highlands, North Carolina. I'm a little bit accurate, aren't I?
Yes. So that sounds rather strange. Putting it. Oh, wow.
Well,
what
the
have
book
you got here?
I don't want to get. It's a page turner. It's a thriller in the sense that it's about relationships between people. I want to have you explain the characters, but before we do anything, the story of how this book came about, the gestation of it, shall we say?
Yes.
Can you tell that story, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I set out, the setting came first in this one. I literally set out to write a book that was had a Highlands, set in Highlands, had a Highland story as being, the kind of place that you couldn't really, it wouldn't really work somewhere else. I needed the mountains, I needed summer people. I kind of knew where I was going with this, but not exactly. I knew I wanted to have maybe an old estate or house that was prominent in the story, almost a character. I knew that I wanted to have a group of friends, male and female, who had known each other for a long time.
In other words, this is before you spent...
This is before. This is where I was going. So rented a house in Highlands one summer, in the Highlands area.
Explain to the audience what Highlands is.
Exactly, it's Highlands Cashers area. It encompasses not just the little town of Highlands or Cashers, either one, but a lot of lakes and really, mountain areas. Some people have houses way up on the mountains, some of them, down in the Cashers Valley and
It's
so
almost
forth.
it's a secret summer retreat
Exactly.
for wealthy Atlantans for the past 100 years almost.
Has been, and
to beat the summer heat.
Charlestonians and so forth. A lot of Florida people come up to beat the summer
I'm
heat.
sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I rented a house, and the house was rather dark and spooky, so that that kind of helped set the atmosphere for what I was going to do with the book. Though I wasn't thinking spooky or anything like that at the time. I just wanted to tell a story of these summer people and some of their interrelations and so forth. The house also had some beautiful gardens around it. And I had heard that the former owner's wife had had planted the gardens, and that was her project. But she had died several years before.
And that's basically all you knew?
That's all I knew.
Okay.
Yes, that's all I knew. And I actually, while exploring the gardens, came across her final resting place, that her ashes were buried in the gardens.
So describe
that she loved.
It sends a thrill up my spine. That's both good and bad, because I think you were alone at the time?
Yes.
And you're literally walking through a garden in the back.
And stumble across a grave.
And you stumble across the grave.
Yes. No, that's, maybe, and it's isolated.
Yeah.
This is there are, not any neighbors around or anything like that. So, and I was going to be alone in a dark,
and you're also
spooky
alone.
house, at night. And I had already heard a panther's cry. I'm sure either that or somebody was sounding like a panther in the woods.
Okay.
I would see a bear there. So, I was certainly a little spooked by the whole experience. But I was also totally drawn into this woman's story. And I kept visiting her gravesite and really, like I was almost getting to know her as the former owner of the woman who had loved this house and done the gardens and so forth. Coincidentally, or maybe not.
Cassandra, what were you reading at the time?
Yes. I had brought along, now this had happened before, but I had brought along 2 or 3 books that I'd read before because I don't like to get anything new when I'm working. I was working on starting out this book. I brought along an old copy of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. And so not very smart on my part either to start reading it late at night one night, but I realized the parallels between the story I was trying to create. A woman, maybe I was already thinking that I would have an outsider come into this group and would she be accepted and so forth, because this is an exclusive, enclave of summer people. And that became, that really became the inspiration, Rebecca, because I like the narrator, was becoming, intrigued with the woman who had died, and still her presence, I felt.
I just want to remind the audience that Rebecca, the famous movie and the novel by Daphne du Maurier, is set around a wealthy man who loses his wife. He remarries, takes his new wife back to this ancestral home, and she feels that something is not quite right. There's either a presence there, du Maurier is so good, and the character, the husband doesn't, you don't trust him that much. But this, I want to disabuse the audience of something, Cassandra. So a number of critics have said your book, Moonrise, is a reworking of Rebecca.
No,
it ain't. It's a homage.
No,
okay.
no, it definitely is not. And I was so hoping that no one would pick up on that, and because I never intended to retell Rebecca. It was just the inspiration, the idea sort of helped me along with getting this book kicked off.
So let's talk about the plot. Having read the book, I don't want to give too much away, okay? So let's talk about the book itself. It's not narrated, there are 3 points of view.
Yes.
You've got Helen Honeycutt, you've got Tansy Dunwoody, and one of my favorite characters, Willa. Talk about these 3 voices.
Right. I love to tell stories in voices because I love the way that we all have our own perspective. And
I got to tell you one thing, Cassandra. I recently read a novel that used different voices, and it didn't succeed because I didn't know who the voices were. I would lose them. But thank God at your chapter, for the audience, there are chapter headings that tell you that this is Helen speaking. Thank you.
Yes, I've done the same thing with books, and I would love to be able to have my voices distinctive enough that you were. But sometimes it's very hard.
Yeah.
You got 2 female, characters in your trend, so sometimes it's hard to do. But Helen, it's Helen's story.
Yep.
So she is the main voice, and she begins the story and ends the story. She is the young woman, middle-aged woman, who falls in love. She's had a hard life and a very disappointing.
Married to a no-good doctor.
Disappointing marriage, and is finally beginning to find herself. And she meets and falls in love with this very charismatic man who is grieving the loss of his new wife, and he's very vulnerable. But the truth is they both are. So Helen is the voice that carries the story. But she is the one who comes to Moonrise, which is an estate in Highlands. And it's the home, the summer home of her new husband's former wife who died, was much beloved. And she expects to be welcome there, that she's entranced with the whole idea. She's a Florida girl, she's not used to the mountains, but she is not welcome. She tries to get into a tightly knit group of friends. So I thought it was only fair that I should have one of the friends' point of view from one, and kind of look at this new wife coming in from their perspective. Otherwise, you're thinking these are the meanest people. They're so unkind and not unwelcoming to this woman who all she's done is fall in love with this man, but they might even make you doubt, well, was she a gold digger? Did she marry him because of who he was and so forth? So I have Tansy, who is an Atlanta socialite, and one of these sort of acid tongue women that tells it like she sees it, and she's somewhat intimidating. Certainly she intimidates Helen. Helen is nothing like these women. She wasn't raised like they were raised. The moon gardens that Rosalind tended for generations, the secrets have been passed down. Helen doesn't know any of this, and even that's held against her. I mean,
the world that Helen, this is what I love, the world that Helen is introduced to through her husband is a world that, when I was growing up, I resented these people. We used to call them rich kids.
Yes.
Not only were they smart, not only did they get really good scores on their college boards and went to the best schools, they were also talented, and to top everything off, they were good looking.
They're good looking, everything, yes.
Hateful people. No.
But you know what happens sometimes, James, we get to know these people and they're wonderful. I mean,
Of
they
course,
can't help
of
it that
course.
they were born with a silver spoon any more than
Of course.
some of the rest of us,
But it's a beautiful evocation of these,
Ex-
and I know these
exactly.
people in Buckhead.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So that's the society that I was looking at. And then I wanted to have a local person looking at the summer people. What kind of perspective, do they have? So I have a housekeeper, not Mrs. Danvers, but a housekeeper who is a young mountain woman. Her mother had been the housekeeper at Moonrise for all these years, and she has taken over, and that's Willa. And her interaction, she's almost like a member of the family, but you learn a lot of Willa and about.
But she knows the ways of people. She's grounded in reality in many ways.
She's an earthy kind of.
She's no James
woman.
Dickey mountain person, if you know it. Right.
I know. Yes.
Can we talk about a few other characters, because you evoke this lifestyle where they all go, for instance, this group of people take Helen to the Bascom Art Center.
Yes.
And one of their group is beautiful, intelligent, and she's a Pulitzer Prize winning poet. That's you wrote about her so beautifully. That's Mina and Link. Talk about Link and Mina for a minute.
Okay, yeah. I've wanted, as I said, wanted to have couples.
Oh, yeah,
and kind of a variety. Rosalind and Emmett had a very, good marriage, satisfying marriage, but people marry for different reasons. And so I have Link as a professor. I won't even attempt to pronounce. He's a butterfly scientist. It's called.
It's like a.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wrote it in the book,
Right,
but
right.
I don't know how to pronounce it. But he's a scientific, but he's very wise.
Right.
He's sort of the archetype of the quiet, steady, Zen-like friend that all of us, I think, love to have. And he, maybe out of loneliness, married this flamboyant poet from New York.
Yeah.
And
who takes herself very seriously.
She's one of these poets that takes herself very
yeah.
seriously. She's quite proud of the
Yeah.
fact that she won the Pulitzer Prize and lets you know. And so I wanted, to have some of these conflicts and different kind
Yeah.
of people. So we have this very calm presence, wise presence with Link, while his wife is she kind of gets on everyone's nerves, and they don't mind telling that she's maybe not one of their favorite people.
Then you've got Kit Rutherford, who I want the audience to keep in mind these are all very attractive people.
Yes.
And it's funny because I've read several of your other novels, Cassandra, and this is the first time where friendship is a little bit darkened.
Yes.
Do I get that correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It is a darker look at friendship. And once I knew what I was going to do with the book, with the outsider coming in and trying to be accepted into a group that she's so different from, and they resent her and they're still mourning the woman that she's replacing, I realized that it would be a very different take for me on friendship, because I have written about the power of friendship.
Because one of the elements that I really enjoyed about the book was that there's a lot of dialogue from each character. Mm-hmm. Then you turn a couple of pages, and then that dialogue is interpreted, the conversation, I should say, is interpreted by another character. And when you read between the lines, you never know who's speaking the truth. And
that's what I love. I love doing that in a book. I think I would do all my books that way if I could. It just fascinates me, the different perspectives that each of us can have on the very same event. The way we can all see people differently. Some of us might just love someone else, and we think, what on earth does he or she see in him or her,
So to put the cap on this, you assemble these people. They've come up from Florida, from Atlanta, from parts of the South, and you put them together for a summer in Highlands, Cashiers, North Carolina. And to top everything off, they're in Moonrise. Now I've got this image of Moonrise. I've been to Highlands once, I told you before the interview, and they call them cottages, but they're bigger than this.
Exactly.
They're like a house that you can talk about. What is it?
Well, I wanted, now this is sort of the inspiration, a little more of the
lake and everything.
Of Manderley.
Okay.
The house that was almost a character.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have a historic estate as a central part of the story. And it's an old Victorian estate that has been in home tours and garden tours and so forth. It's was kept up by the former wife, Rosalind, almost like a museum.
In my mind's eye, I just want the audience to get this. It's one of those Victorian houses with many angles and a turret around.
Exactly. Yes. But it could very well be haunted as well. So we get into that.
It's got haints in it. No, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Let's get into that right now. That's a Southern expression that I love, a haint. You are very generous in the book. At the end of the book, you talk about you get questions from your readers, and it's right in the book. It's a little additional treat reading the book. And you say you believe in these things. Now, I am one to say I do too, because it's not that I believe in ghosts or anything like that, but when you go into these old houses have a personality.
That's no question.
Could you talk about what can you say without giving too much away about Moonrise?
Yeah.
Talk about the garden in back of Moonrise. Why is it called Moonrise?
It's called Moonrise because
I love that.
The gardens that let me back up.
Go ahead.
It's
sure.
a Victorian house. And I had to do some research on the Victorians to be able to create this house, both in my mind. And I'd seen, some houses that are similar as well to this one. But their gardens began to interest me because they did sort of unique things or unusual things. So this has a unique nocturnal garden in the back that everything is designed to bloom at night, and especially when there's a full moon. So Moonrise is what they eventually called the estate when it was first built, but it was
and I was going to ask you answer this question at the end of the book. You even describe how to create a moon garden, but they really do exist. A garden designed to be walked through at night with the,
Yes.
You even plant the garden with the idea that this will be seen at night.
You do.
Yeah.
The most famous is in England,
Yeah.
Sissinghurst, I think it's called. I'm drawing a blank
Yeah, yeah.
on the woman's
That's all right.
name, but very, very well known, you know. Totally, mostly white blooms, because for obvious reasons, you know, will show up in the moonlight. But I became totally into, and then the garden in some ways becomes a metaphor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just like the whole night blooming, something that comes out, something beautiful that comes out of the dark. And then I, as I mentioned, have Helen, who has no skills as a gardener. That would have been frivolous, the way she was brought up to raise flowers for beauty and so forth. She came from a very poor background. So she is enchanted with the idea of the moon garden, but she can't possibly keep these up. And it becomes another way of her not being a part of this group.
It reminded me, the garden reminded me of the Devil's Dictionary by Ambrose Bierce. Do you remember that famous book? Bierce says, belladonna in Italian means a beautiful woman. In English, a poisonous plant. An amazing coincidence of language.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yes. Oh well, I dealt with that a little bit.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Yeah, some of the nightshades are poisonous.
You know, last time I interviewed you, it was 6 years ago, and I refrained from mentioning your husband. But you mentioned this in the back of the book. You mentioned everybody knows that Cassandra King is married to Pat Conroy.
Yes, I can't get away from it.
So I have to ask you a dumb question, okay? What's it like? No, I'm just kidding. But you were married to a Presbyterian minister. Midway through your life, you marry Pat Conroy. You're both novelists, but here you are, to me, a very accomplished, introspective, quiet, thoughtful novelist, marrying perhaps the most popular, well-known, beloved, and outspoken novelist in the world, who wears his life on his sleeve. My losing season, my reading life, recipes of my life. I know Pat Conroy better than I know my own wife, for crying out loud.
Yes.
And you're married to him. But yet you say, and I'm getting to a question, yet you say at the end of the book, when you entertain questions, written down questions, writers should be married to writers. Could you tell us why?
Yes,
I love that. I love that.
I certainly can. My desire to be a writer it did cause some problems in my former marriage. Because when I was working,
you're so modest.
I'm trying to.
I have a few problems.
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to be tactful here. In that, you know, I should have been doing church work when I was writing my little stories, and so I tried to do both by writing devotionals and you know, Easter pageants and this sort of stuff. I don't think the marriage eventually fell apart, and certainly not for that reason, though I think that was a factor. You know, I was trying to fulfill a role that society and I had put on myself as well as the perfect preacher's wife, and I wasn't cut out for it. You know, it was a struggle. Yeah. So I lost myself somewhere along the way, and after divorce, and when I met Pat, and we eventually married through cast our lots together. He understood. I couldn't believe, you know, that I could actually say, no, I can't really go out to dinner tonight. I've got to work on my book. You know, I could never have said something like, I can't go to the church meeting tonight because I'm working on my book, for heaven's sakes. So writers understand how we have to. We live in our own universes. We create our own universes, and we're not there part of the time.
Didn't Pat once say in one of his books that you write on one floor, he writes on the other, and when you are inspired, or sometimes writing is just work, don't talk to me for 3 hours or something.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Now, he loves to tell when I got Lyme's disease from the deer on frill.
Oh, my God.
And I was upstairs sick for 3 days, and he thought it rather strange that I didn't appear, down at dinner time, didn't appear to go to bed at night in our bedroom downstairs, but just thought I was, working on my book.
I've heard that story before.
Yeah,
God.
yeah. A tad exaggeration on past.
Listen, we've been talking, ladies and gentlemen, I've been talking to Cassandra King about her latest novel, Moonrise. Tremendous, tremendous novel. But it's been 6 years since your last novel. I want to ask you one last question, Cassandra. Do you take time off from writing, or are you always thinking about your next work?
Always writing.
Seriously?
Always writing in my head. And that, I think that's another thing that writers understand about each other. I'm off in a different world part of the time. Yes, I don't take time off from writing, and probably should. Maybe I'd be a better rounded person if I did.
Well, listen, I want to thank you once again for being my guest. Writers in Focus, ladies and gentlemen, Cassandra King, one of America's great novelists. Her latest book is called Moonrise. It's a wonderful read. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed.